Before Bridget, everything positive I just said about Marvel Rivals applied to Overwatch. It didn't reinvent the wheel, it took a lot of inspiration off of TF2. But it did a great job at making memorable characters, giving them their own game plans, and giving them their own weaknesses. For this story, specifically the supports, Mercy had the most consistent single target healing, but had a hard time living on her own. But with Afera, she could float around in the air and be a much harder target for dive comps. But this opened her up to getting just shot down by hit scans like Soldier, Widowmaker, McCree, so there was always something that could shut you down. And because she was the strongest healer with the strongest ultimate, she was the main target for most teams. And it's this philosophy of the better you are at healing, the worse your escape options are, is what governed how all the supports were designed. LuCioH didn't offer that much healing in comparison, so he was allowed to run on walls, push back anyone trying to get close, and give him and his team more movement speed. Zenyatta's healing warp was extremely consistent, and his ultimate was the best at keeping his entire team alive. So naturally, he had no options to escape whatsoever,
Zenyatta, you can't. Not good at climbing trees, I suppose.
and relied entirely on his range and his team. Obvious strengths, even more obvious weaknesses was applicable to any comp with any character, which is why Overwatch at its best had almost every character see some level of viability. I say some level of viability because it's a small misconception that before Bridget everything was perfect, and that's kinda not true. Dive comp was the best comp in the game and people were kinda sick of seeing it. It wasn't fundamentally broken by any means, but it was statistically the strongest comp. Instead of responding normally with just nerfs to stats, they responded with Bridget.
Get out of here!
Bridget was, and I mean this with no exaggeration whatsoever, one of the strongest characters I've seen in any competitive game ever made. It should be obvious that a healer should be able to be focused down and killed. But with her shield, her knockback, her stun, her healing, and her armor, she just didn't die.
They actually kept him alive. Dallas still making this push work. Mistakes down two. Mickey going wild, chasing Kellex away.
And it's not enough for her to be unkillable. We have to make everyone else on the team unkillable as well.
Her healing that's AoE gets literally everybody in the team. She doesn't really have to worry about turning around and pocketing a specific person when her healing just gets absolutely everybody all times when she has it up.
She can throw armor to her teammates, also known as other supports, who are now unkillable as well. She presses ult, and now everyone on her team gets free, non-decaying armor.
If you look at the way she supports, she adds additional health to characters, which is also a major problem. Every hero has a certain health meter for a reason, right?
And it's not enough that she's unkillable and her team is now unkillable. We also have to make sure that she can do damage as well. She can auto-attack cancel with her stun and her right-click, meaning she can combo tracers, the damage dealer, to death. Genji's jumping in will die, Sombra's trying to exist will die, anyone in her general vicinity cannot kill her and will die.
When you see Brigitte, you think that she's pretty much unkillable because most DPS characters that do all the damage don't really work against her.
So it's really great if you've got that annoying Tracer or Genji diving in on you and you use the shield bash, you're really going to disable them very quickly.
She should be focused on support, but instead, you have a support with tank-like features as well as DPS-like features that actually can out-frag DPS heroes.
Her shield just allows for a lot of survivability, and like just her base stats with her healing and her ult and everything in her kit is just extremely strong, and it shuts down a lot of the DPS characters that used to be played and allow for the more traditional, as we know, like GOATs or 3-3 comps.
In a game where support, DPS, and tank are all clearly defined roles, she was a support that could tank and deal damage. She had one weakness, if you could even call it that, which was long range. And GOATs was the natural progression of a team building around her one weakness. Put shields in front of her, put speed next to her, and put healing behind her, and there was nothing you could do to kill this comp. You know, except for Zarya Diva combos. But the entire reason GOATs was even possible was because of her. She fundamentally broke the game, and instead of nerfing her range or taking away her abilities or doing anything, they did nothing for an entire year. And then they created Roll Lock 222, a band-aid solution that became the permanent solution, which caused even more problems later on down the line. Because guess what? Double shield became the meta, and because you couldn't bring more than 2 DPS to break through those shields, there wasn't actually a way to counter it, which meant that both teams were running double shield, which meant that both tank and support roles quickly became locked into 2 specific characters each, which meant that nobody wanted to queue into these boring roles, which meant that no one was finding any games. After years of terrible decisions, the game was dying. Something needed to change. And I mean, something did.